Hey there, CJ Math students. So today we're officially going to begin Unit 2, which is operations with rational numbers. So kind of taking the things that we learned about fractions and decimals, throwing in some integers, which we're going to learn about today, and be able to fluently operate with all different types of numbers when given certain problems. So exercise 1, positive and negative numbers review, we did that together as a class. Let's go down to exercise 2, counting up and counting down on the number line. So counting up corresponds to positive numbers. It also corresponds to basically moving right on the number line. Sorry about that. And so obviously counting down corresponds to negative numbers and also known as moving left. So if we go ahead and take a look at a number line here, we're going to answer questions A through C. Where do you begin when locating a number on the number line? You always start at 0 no matter what. So start at 0. No matter what. So if I tell you find me -5, start at 0, and then you say, hey, I move 5 times left. If I tell you go to 8, start at 0, move 8 times right. Very basic. So what do you call the distance between a number, any number, and 0 on the number line? This is called absolute value. This is important. I want you to put a star next to it. It's going to be the answer to one of your homework problems, right? So the absolute value is the distance between a number and 0. So for instance, the absolute value in math is written like this. 2 bars. This says the absolute value of 6. How far is 6 away from 0? How many spaces is 6 away from 0? The answer is 6 spaces. Very simple. It's very similar to something like, what is the absolute value of -6? How many spaces is -6 away from 0? Now, there's no such thing as negative spaces, right? So it's still 6 spaces away from 0. So the absolute value of a number is always positive. What's the absolute value of 7? It's 7. What's the absolute value of -7? Still 7, because it's about spaces, not negative spaces. So what is the relationship between 7 and -7? Which number is smaller and why? So they are equal distances away from 0, but which number is smaller? -7 is smaller, smaller, because B/C means because it is further left on the number line. All right, this is a very important fact. The further left you go, the smaller it gets. Now with positive numbers, this is really easy. Like 7 is further left than 8. That's why 7 is smaller than 8. Super simple, right? But now you have to train your brain that -7 is actually bigger than -8. I am more negative. I am further left. It's like owing more money. You don't want to owe more money, right? So the further left I go, the smaller in value the number actually becomes. So between -1 and -10, which one is bigger? -1 is bigger because it's further right, or because -10 is further left. What about between -4 and -5? Which one is the bigger number? That's -4. What about between 5 and -10? Which one's the bigger number? It's 5, because it's further right, or -10 is further left. What about between 0 and -9? 0 is the bigger number because, again, it's further right, or -9 is further left. Okay, that idea of being further left makes it smaller. So the Minnesota Vikings ran 4 plays from the 50-yard line. Assume the 50-yard line represents 0 on a number line, so we'll assume that this is like the 50-yard line. Each of the 4 plays, the ball was given to Adrian Peterson. Well, unfortunately, he tore his ACL, I think, recently, so he can't do this anymore. But what is the sum of the yardage for Adrian's 4 rushing attempts? So we're going to start at the 50-yard line. On his first attempt, he gets to go forward 5 yards. He gained 5 yards. On his second attempt, I'll put this in red, he gets tackled in the backfield for a loss of 5 yards. So this is basically saying 5 plus -5 is equal to what? Well, if you start at 0, you move 5 forward, and then you move 5 back, 5 plus -5 is equal to 0. Now his next attempt, he moves back 4 more yards. All right? So what is 0 plus -4? 0 plus negative 4 is basically equal to negative 4, right? Because you start at 0, you lost 4 yards, you're at negative 4. And then on his very last attempt, he got it together and he gained 8 yards. So I'm going to go forward 4 spaces, 4 more spaces, that's 8 yards, right? I should end up on 4 right there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So what is negative 4 plus 8 equal? Well, that equals what we ended up on. It equals 4. What's the final position on the number line, i.e. how many yards did AP rush for? And that's 4 yards, positive, right? If AP was given the ball a 5th time, what yardage would bring him back to 0? So what would happen where he would go from here back to 0? Well, that's simple. If I'm at a positive 4, how do I get back to 0? I lose 4 yards. So I would lose 4 yards. I'd say negative 4 yards. Another way to say that is I would lose 4 yards. Right? To the back side. The additive inverse is basically just the opposite. So what is the opposite of 7? It's negative 7. How far is negative 7 away from 0 and in which direction? It is 7 spaces left. So another way to say this is the absolute value of negative 7 is equal to positive 7. All absolute values are always positive. Let me do a couple more. What's the absolute value of 0? It's 0. What's the absolute value of 3? It's 3. What's the absolute value of negative 3? Still positive 3. What's the absolute value of, what about 3 plus 3 plus 4? Well, 3 plus 4 is 7, so basically this is saying what's the absolute value of 7? It's 7, right? Thinking back to our previous work, how would you use the counting method to represent the following? In a football game, the rush is 7, and then the rush is negative 7. Well, I would move right, I would start at 0 first of all. Start at 0. And move right 7 spaces, then left 7 spaces. What do you think will hold true for the sum of any number and its opposite? So if I move right 7 spaces, then left 7 spaces. Or if I move right 20 spaces and then left 20 spaces, it will always equal 0. So such as negative 2 plus 2, 0. 4 plus negative 4, 0. Negative 100 plus 100, 0. Any opposites will always equal 0. And that's exactly what this says. The additive inverse is the fancy way for saying adding opposites of a number is the opposite of a number on the number line. For example, the opposite of negative 3 is 3. A number and its additive inverse have a sum of 0. They always add up to 0. So the sum of any number and its opposite is equal to 0. You have 2 BuzzMath levels today. I'm going to go ahead and quickly show you what the new thing on BuzzMath is. I just go through basically 2 examples, and then you do your best of your ability on BuzzMath. Remember, you want to think before you click, and you also want to write stuff down. That's why I have you gotten some loose leaf today. So the first level is using integers to represent situations. Write an integer that represents the situation. My kite is 15 above the ground, 15 feet above the ground. That's just a positive 15. Positive words are like above, gain, obviously the word positive, something like above sea level, something like higher, rises. Those are all positive words that mean positive integers. Write an integer that describes this situation. You lost 72 marbles. That would be negative 72. So words like lost, below, dropped, negative, obviously, lower, below sea level, anything that's thinking about stuff going down, that's all negative. All this stuff is stuff going up, right? That's positive. And lastly, locate and identify integers. Number 1 is your last level. So they're going to start someplace like this that says drag the arrow to 2. So you have to envision this as being, you start at negative 4, so that means this is negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2. That means you need to drag this arrow all the way here. Be careful. Sometimes, like in a problem like this, it skips 2. So negative 23, negative 21, that means this is not negative 20, but negative 19, skip 2, negative 17, skip 2, negative 15, skip 2, negative 13. So what is this arrow on? This arrow is on negative 13.